So, I was watching Sam Collins's Outspoken podcast the other day, specifically the episode called Coming Out as Conservative, which is about classically Abby, aka Abby Shapiro, not to be confused with the young actress of the same name in the Doom Patrol series. This Abby is best known on YouTube for, 1, being conservative commentator Ben Shapiro's sister, and 2, paying to advertise her YouTube video Why I Came Out as Conservative, with the ads being run on apparently hundreds and thousands of YouTube channels, particularly LGBT etc. channels, and causing her a lot of ill will in the process, but undeniably doing the job of promoting her and her channel. Now, Abby's big brother is a god-awful human being, and even before the YouTube thing started, when she was establishing herself as an opera singer, when people discovered she was Ben Shapiro's sister, she started getting a lot of anti-Semitic abuse online. This is obviously a very bad thing that I don't think is at all acceptable, but that doesn't mean she should be immune to criticism, because in her own way, Abby seems to be kind of as awful a person as her brother is. Anyway, she did a video about 5 things she refused to apologise for as a conservative woman. Those 5 things being 1. Being pro-life, 2. Being a champion of marriage, 3. Believing in God, 4. Praising modesty, and 5. Loving America. These aren't necessarily inherently terrible things. I've always thought it's not the beliefs that matter so much as the actions that those beliefs may or may not inspire you to perform. And as Sam pointed out in his comments on Abby's video, no one is actually asking her to apologise for these things. What they want her to apologise for is those ads. But I'm impressed by Abby's bravery in making this video, taking a stand for what she thinks is right, and refusing to kowtow to the howling mobs that probably don't really care one way or the other. And in that spirit, I have also decided to take my own stand, so, having been duly inspired by Abby Shapiro, I'm refusing to apologise for the following things. 1. Having 2 feet. 2. These Jess Franco Blu-rays. 3. Pneumono ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. 4. Whatever the hell I did in Photoshop to these worthless pricks. And 5. Helvetica. Now, no one has asked me to apologise for any of these things, and I presume no one would be stupid enough to do so. I mean, you could interpret the first one, having 2 feet, as an attack upon amputees or something, but I'm a diabetic with arterial thrombosis, which means I will almost certainly end up losing part, if not all, of my left leg at some point in my future, so I get to make jokes like that because I'll probably be an amputee eventually myself. Anyway, these are 5 things I refuse to apologise for, whether anyone wants me to or not. Because sometimes you just have to stand up for the things you believe in, even when one of those things is a video nasty by Jess Franco, and my kind of unappetising feet. Anyway, since I'm talking about god-awful human beings, Marilyn Manson. It's now a little bit over 20 years since The Onion published a legendary piece called Marilyn Manson Now Going Door to Door Trying to Shock People, in which basically young Brian Warner and his merry men go door to door trying to frighten the life out of the good people of American suburbia, even though they're pretty unimpressed by Manson's comedy stylings. That was published back in January 2001, a great piece highlighting just how contrived Manson and his shtick were even then. Now it's 2021, of course, you may even have noticed, and we're discovering just how genuinely awful Brian actually is. There's been speculation before now that Manson was an abusive piece of shit, ever since Evan Rachel Wood said in an interview that she'd been in an abusive relationship in the past, Evan Rachel Wood having been one of Manson's girlfriends back around 2009-2010. But the clues seem to have been there all along if you were paying attention, which I admittedly stopped doing some years ago. Among the other women that have spoken against Manson in the last few weeks is an actress he hired for a music video for a song called I Want to Kill You Like They Do in the Movies, which he said in an interview was about his then declining relationship with Evan Rachel Wood, who he said in an interview he wanted to hit her in the head with a sledgehammer. And there was another video from the same album which shows him beating a woman to death who looks awfully like Wood. There's some horrendous claims being made against him by a number of people now, including at least one avowed former employee. But maybe his own words should have been enough to condemn him long before now. But will any of this actually affect him? Because everyone keeps pissing and moaning about cancel culture these days, but the extent to which quote-unquote cancellation actually works seems to be variable at best. Just look at Manson's good friend Johnny Depp, whose legal adventures are something I don't think I need to go into, but he's still got people on his side in spite of everything, like Dior, the company for whom he is apparently still the face of their perfume called Sauvage. I know this because until a couple of weeks ago, there was a big poster of him advertising it at a bus stop in the next street to mine, which I would go past and I couldn't really miss when I was out for a walk in the afternoon. And more to the point, it was an image of Depp from a campaign that Dior actually pulled about 18 months before, because they copped so much flack for it being kind of racist. So obviously they ran it in Australia in February 2021 because we're such a bastion of racial harmony and things like that. As for Manson, his current record label did drop him pretty much immediately that he was actually named in the accusations, but they were just distributing his albums anyway. I don't think this will get in the way of him making his records, and let's face it, Manson is the sort of artist who will always have fans who won't care how badly he behaves. They stuck with him through all the nonsense of the past, and they'll stick with him through the current situation because there's always some hardcore faithful who can overlook everything. Rock fans are good at that sort of thing, I know, because I like black metal. Black metal used to be considered the height of evil in a way that Manson could only dream of. He would play with Nazi-ish iconography at times, whereas the black metal scene has been awash in actual neo-Nazis since the 90s. But it's also been kind of recuperated and even domesticated somewhat over the decades. The black metal scene has generated vast quantities of idiocy, but I think there's a greater perception now that the 90s Norwegian scene in particular was full of stupid teenagers who didn't know any better, and kids just doing silly makeup and posturing. And I suspect most people now approach black metal with a certain degree of ironic distance because they know how much of it is imagery and dressing up. And black metal makes for excellent meme fodder and general comedy because, frankly, so many of the artists involved make it so easy. Even Taylor Swift has been at least semi-jokingly accused of knocking off black metal's propensity for forest-themed visuals with the cover art for her Folklore album. I kind of doubt that was actually what she did, but it does open up amusing visions of Tate going true Norwegian. But the Nazism, at least, is something that still troubles a lot of black metal fans, like myself. I own and have paid for more than a few albums I don't feel great about having paid for, not just the obviously dubious ones like Burzum, but others like Askeval or Winterfilleth that are questionable. And I like quite a few local black metal bands, but some of the folks involved have what we might call dubious connections. But equally, a lot of black metal fans don't seem to care one way or the other. It doesn't bother them. And I suppose Manson's in a similar position in some ways, even with all the recent strife. In the long run, I don't think it'll make that much of a difference to him. Certainly not so much he'll have to go and get a real job or anything. Again, I suspect a lot of his fans just don't care enough. And I suspect we'll know better when the pandemic's finally over and whatever passes for the goth industrial scene these days crawls back into the clubs, and some dickhead asks for the beautiful people, and whether or not the dickhead behind the decks then plays it for them. But basically, Marilyn Manson can go fuck himself, and if certain rumours are true, he probably has many times. In other musical news, Daft Punk have announced that they're breaking up after 28 years together, which is perfectly fine by me. I never particularly liked their music, which I always thought was vacuous, and I can never forgive them in particular for Electroma, the movie they made in 2006, which supposedly provoked a mass walkout at the Cannes Film Festival that year and was unfavourably compared with Vincent Gallo's The Brown Bunny. That's how bad Electroma is. Critics thought The Brown Bunny was better, and The Brown Bunny is a legendary piece of shit. I only watched Electroma because we got sent a DVD of it when I was doing Celluloid Dreams on 2SER way back when, and for some reason that I've never understood, I decided to take it home, and I watched it, and I regretted it. I have watched some unbelievable avant-garde shit in my time, and Electroma is one of the worst examples of alleged experimental film I've ever seen, so quite apart from their shitty music, Daft Punk can go to hell for their shitty film. But let's end this episode with something that I actually like. I've been kind of rediscovering dub lately because a certain online music forum I'm a member of has been featuring a fair bit of that sort of thing in their postings recently. And one album I've been playing a lot is this one, Black Ark in dub. This is some dank, murky shit, and so is the background story somewhat. It's kind of a semi-bootleg of Lee Scratch Perry. Or maybe it isn't. The credited producer is actually Aisha Morrison, who had been Mrs. Lee Scratch Perry until her husband got too weird for her to be around in the late 70s. And she took a bunch of tapes that she'd produced, licensed them for release in 1981, and then left the names of almost everyone involved apart from herself off the album credits, including her erstwhile husband, whose involvement in this thing is still kind of mysterious. Whatever the truth behind it, though, it's actually a pretty decent album. If you like this sort of thing, then you might actually like this particular thing. So that'll do for this installment of the Inanimate Carbon God podcast. Subscribe and so forth, just so you know when the next one comes out for more uplifting and positive discourse about the world and stuff. Bye for now.